Alrighty, we're going to start the second lesson with this same. I'm just going to continue on with these slides. If I can get it to go ahead and be big. We were talking about the nation, the 10 tribes, the nation of Israel, the top of them, and or the top 10 tribes, whatever you want to call them. Anyway, well, I don't understand what is happening. It doesn't want to. There we go. Oh, I'm doing the wrong thing. There we go. Okay. Now, I'm back to this map here showing you how Israel and Judah had divided, and now we're only focusing on Israel right now. Remember that they end up their first king, Jeroboam. He had built those gold cows. He appointed priests for whoever wanted to be a priest. He would appoint them, and also he changed the feast days. So he changed their whole religious makeup. Okay, which really separates them from Judah after that. Okay, so 19 kings down the road, not one of those kings tried to return them back to their previous religion. And meanwhile, while all of that is going on right here, see I'm giving you a bigger picture now of the lands. Israel would have been right over in this area. Okay, up here in Nineveh, the capital of Assyria, these Assyrians had been making a plan to conquer the world pretty much, and they had come up with a strategy, and their society was very militaristic. Is that a word? Militaristic. That's a word. Anyway, they were all about the military. Okay, all the men had to serve. At some point, they supposedly, but they believed this was a myth now, but they had a reputation that their kings always led them into battle, and they went into a big campaign every year. And they did that for the benefit of their God. Okay, these people back in these days were very religious people, no matter what God they worshipped. So it was also for the benefit of their state. They wanted to conquer the world. They wanted an empire. They didn't just want a state. They wanted an empire. And these people, they had come up with plans. I told you all about this at the beginning of the year. This is the tongue pulling out people. Okay, they, in order to be able to fight these campaigns, they needed soldiers all the time. They did not want their own soldiers to die, so they wanted people to just surrender to them. But in order to get people to surrender to them, they had to make them terrified of them. In order, for anybody to do that, they've got to show them what they're all about. And so they would choose which cities or nations they would attack, and they would be so cruel to the people and to their survivors that they would use them as an example of what they'll do to the next state or the next city or the next nation, whatever. They would use those people as an example. And so, according to history books, these people were so scary that sometimes when cities saw the soldiers marching towards them, they would commit mass suicide, because you didn't know if they were willing to make a treaty with you and you serve them, or if they were going to use you as an example. And people did not want to risk it because they were cruel. They skinned people alive. They burned them. They chopped their hands off. They chopped their feet off. They cut babies out of mothers' bellies. They would hang babies around their mother's neck dead babies around their mother's neck and then make them walk through the streets. And I mean, they just did all kinds of not just military actions. They did mental. They just messed with people's heads. Okay, and that was to get people to kowtow to them. Okay, and they're the ones that came into Samaria, and it is. I mean, it's a historical record. It's not just in the Bible that the Assyrians took over Samaria. They did this in 722 BC. And what few people they did leave alive, they scattered them from hither to yon, basically. They moved them over in these areas, okay? And the reason that they would scatter their conquered peoples is to keep them from getting together again and maybe joining back together and fighting against them. So they would scatter them out. And so that's what they did to Samaria. It was a done deal for them, for Israel, rather. Okay. There were a few survivors, a few stragglers left, not very many. Okay. That happened according to scripture. The reason that it happened was because of idolatry. If you looked in 2 Kings chapter 17, verses 7 through 23, you can read the reasons, because as is always, anytime anybody that worshiped God, something bad happened, it seems like. They said, why'd you let this happen, God? All right. Well, these people didn't really worship God, but when it came time for the Assyrians to come in, they want to know why God let that happen. And so he says, you want to know why? This is why. And so you can read that for yourself. According to history, also, the Assyrians the kings, when they would go on those campaigns, they would come back and they would basically plaque their conquering things. They would write about it, have it plaqued, a big plaque put up on the wall of what they had done. And archaeologists have actually found a broken piece of a plaque that, if you'll hold on just a second, I'll tell you what it says. I should have got this before I started making this video, but I got sidetracked. Oh no, I don't have my notebook with me. Anyway, okay, just trust me. I'll just say it from memory as much as I can. That it brags about how he piled their hands and feet in these piles, and how he set them on fire and things like that. When this king was talking about conquering Samaria, which was the capital of Israel. So that means, that he conquered Israel. Okay. So I'm going to show you what's there in these places nowadays. The little pink looking, or I don't know exactly what color it's going to show up when it shows you on the I got to stay away from that little scrolling thing. Anyway, the little red or pink or whatever color it's showing you, these are the nowadays countries. Okay, these are the current countries that are ruling these areas. You see, Assyria is here. Well, this is part of northern Iraq. Okay, Iran is way over here. It's this huge country here. Kuwait here, and then you've got Jordan. Syria is right here. Israel is right in this area right here. It's so small you barely can't even see it on here. So anyway, it just shows you kind of where these places are now. Okay. Now, let's see. So the nation of Israel, the top 10 tribes, the Assyrians came into them in 722 BC. Okay, that is when they destroyed that place. And the reason was because of their idolatry. Remember, they had the two cows. That I'm going to tell you some more stories. You'll have to come back and look in the video library later about how they ended up worshiping a god named Baal. This is just, these videos right here are just overviews. Pretty much, I'll go back into more detail in those later videos. That are the like story time videos, okay, Mother Goosey kind of things, except they're not Mother Goose at all. All right, and then another thing that the Assyrians did, I told you earlier, their policy was don't ever let people stay together from a nation that we conquer, because then they may decide to rebel against us at some point. So they denationalized all of their conquered peoples. And so they would scatter the survivors out. All right. So the Israelites were scattered over the Assyrian Empire. But the Assyrians knew that Israel, that's a pretty good place to live. It had some good crops. It was a traveling place for any travelers who wanted to do business with Egypt that were coming from the Babylonia area, or the Assyrian area, whatever you want to call it. They would have to go through there, through Israel. And so, I mean, that's a hot commodity, make some money. So they sent some conquered peoples and some of their own people there to make a little money in that land. They did not want it to grow up and be taken over by the wild animals. However, and when they did this, some of them intermarried with some of the Israelites that were left there. Okay. And they had babies, of course. And these children grew up to be Samaritans. So they were a mixed race. Okay. You've heard of Samaritans. You've heard of the Good Samaritan, I'm sure. Anyway, this is where the Samaritans come from. They are a mixed group of people they're part Israelite and they're part Assyrian. Okay, that's going to cause problems later because, racism has been going on for a very long time. And even though these people couldn't help where they came from, they were looked down on by the Israelites. They were going to be later hated by the pure-blooded Jews. The Jews aren't even called the Jews at this point in history. They're not even called that yet. But they're going to be, the Samaritans will be hated by them, and they're going to return the favor also. There's going to be some bad vibes there because of just basically racism. Okay. And we can talk more about that in a later video. Now, let me see. Nope, don't want to go there yet. No, back. Okay. I do want to tell you one thing, one more thing about the Assyrians, and I wonder how I can, okay, I can stop that. Stop that. I want to go back to my meeting. Where am I? I'll meet with you in a second when I find where I am. Okay, here I am. All right. So I just want to tell you one other thing about Assyria coming into Samaria. All right. When those Assyrians came in, and this is before the Samaritans actually, there were so many of them that they actually even formed a small nation or group of people. Anyway, they came in, they brought their religion with them. They worshiped all these different gods and things. And so when they came in, they started worshiping these other gods, God sent lions to eat them. Now, when he did that, these people were smart enough to say, hey, the God of this land don't like us too much. He don't like us worshiping these other gods and stuff, but we don't know how to worship him. Now, God had sent warning after warning after warning to his own people, and they didn't get the message. But these people who have never even heard of God really get it. And they say, he's not happy with us. We got to learn how to worship him. So they send word back to the king of the Assyrians, and they tell him, hey, look, man, we're fixing, all of us going to be cat food, big cat food. Those big old toothed lions are eating us for fun. So you've got to send somebody back here to please teach us how to worship the God of this land. Because back then, remember, I've told you that all the people were religious in some form or fashion all across the world, but they believed that whatever their gods were territorial. Okay, they might have a god for everything. A lot of them did, but for the most part, they believed that their gods were, just the God of this land. We got to worship the God of this land, or these lions are going to eat us. Okay. They brought their gods from their land with them, but since that wasn't the land of their gods, I guess they didn't think that their gods could protect them. Anyway, so they want to worship the God of this land. So the king sends a priest back. Y'all remember about that priest? He wasn't a Levite. He was just a priest that had been appointed by the king. So when he comes, he does teach them how to worship the God of the land, which would be the creator God, okay, the God of Israel. He teaches them, but he doesn't really teach them that he's the only God. Because remember, they were also, before they got taken away, they were worshiping cows. And you're going to find out in a later story, bulls and all kinds of gods that they were worshiping. So he teaches them about God, but he doesn't teach them about that you're only supposed to worship him. So they continue to worship their gods along with God. Now, God, he did stop the lions. And he stopped those lions because these people, they asked for help. They asked to be taught. They did what they were taught. Okay. Now, later on, God will expect more out of them. But for that time, he accepted what they had to get, what they knew to give. Okay. And so he stopped the lions. I just love that part. I love that story. I love that even though they weren't doing things right, even though they weren't worshiping only God and all that, he still stopped the lions because they were doing as much as they knew. Okay. So, we're going to talk more now about how that big green glob of the Assyrians, there's one little place that's causing a problem. There's a little pink dot left that they haven't taken over, and they want to go after it too. That happens to be Judah. So next time we'll talk about how Judah, how they're going to go up against the Assyrians, what's going to happen with that. All right. See y'all in the next video.